Good morning. I have opening words for you, but they come with a disclaimer in the form of a story. So I travel Canada and the US celebrating humor, and I keep having the same conversation over and over again. Someone will sidle up to me, usually in coffee hour, and they will say, "It's important to laugh." And I will say, "Uh-huh." And then they will say, "Even with all the, it's important to laugh." And what the all the is changes from week to week, but there is always an all the, you can count on it. And I am struck by how the tone of this interaction is the tone of voice I assume people reserve for the buying and selling of drugs. It's very sneaky. Because with so much going on in the world, it can feel a little bit heretical to laugh. And so as an outsider coming from Canada, I just want to say, I'm not ignoring those things. I'm not laughing because they're unimportant. I'm laughing because they are important. And I think when things are serious, that's when it becomes all that much more important to take time for laughter and community. So with that in mind, I am finally getting to your opening words by Dan Savage. During the darkest days of the AIDS crisis, we buried our friends in the morning, we protested in the afternoon, and we danced all night. The dance kept us in the fight because it was the dance we were fighting for. It didn't look like we were going to win. And then we did. It doesn't feel like we're going to win now, but we could. Keep fighting. Keep dancing. And I would add to that, keep laughing. I invite you to stand in body or spirit and join in singing "Come, Come, Whoever You Are."
Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come yet again, come. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come yet again, come. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come yet again, come. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come yet again, come.
Good morning. I'm Reverend Meredith Barber. I'm one of the ministers here at the Unitarian Church of Baton Rouge, and I'm so glad that you've chosen to worship with us this morning. As you heard a little bit from Liz, we're excited to share our pulpit with her this morning and to have some humor and some space for laughter. Right now, I have a few exciting announcements to tell you about. First, our auction is on Saturday. Please, yes, exciting. So this is basically all about that. Please buy tickets. Doors open at 5:30. There's going to be a jazz ensemble. And there's also something exciting I have to share with you. So this year there's a kids area and kids tickets. And all the remaining kids tickets have been purchased. So the first 5 people that reach out to Kathy or Allison will get free kids tickets for the auction. So please do that. Please bring your little ones. Adult tickets can also be purchased at the door if you suddenly realize that you can come. So yes, we're excited and we hope to see all of you there. And this is going to be my first auction with you. I'm excited. So middle hour programs this week, happening today in room 6, we have Faith and Exploration, Signs and Symbols of Our Faith. Our social justice team is going to be off this week, but I want you to specifically invite you next week. They're going to have a special planning meeting to kind of think more about the future and direction of social justice and what our sub-teams are going to be focusing on. So please come to that. And then today in room 1, we have our Trans UU group in room 5, and obviously just thinking about the auction. So with that, let's deepen into the spirit of worship. I invite you to join me in a time of prayer. Loving God, Spirit of life, mystery in which we live and move and have our being, draw near to us this morning and hear our prayers. We give thanks today for a new day dawning, for new life that seems to force its way in, even on days when that seems impossible. Hold all of us this morning who have come here seeking something, whether it be solace, healing, health, sobriety, peace. Help to hold all of us who are seeking a world without war, a world without violence, a world where no one's life is uprooted on a whim. Let this place be a sanctuary, a place where you can bring whatever and however you're feeling and lay it down in a place where it will be honored, respected, held. For all these things and those known only in the quiet of our hearts, we pray. May it be so. Amen.
Good morning. In my eagerness to share those opening words with you, I forgot to say hello, my name is Liz. I'm from Canada. I went to seminary with Nathan, your senior minister, and I work quite closely with Kathy, so I'm very excited to be invited here. It's really cold where I come from. It's beautiful here. Thank you for having me. I'm going to do our Time for All Ages, and the story for the Time for All Ages is After the Fall by Dan Santat. My name is Humpty Dumpty. This was my favorite spot high up on the wall. I know, it is a weird place for an egg to be, but I loved being close to the birds. Then one day I fell. I am somewhat famous for that part. Folks called it the Great Fall, which sounds a little grand. It was just an accident, but it changed my life. Fortunately, all the king's men managed to put me back together. Well, most of me. There were some parts that couldn't be healed with bandages and glue. After that day, I became afraid of heights. I was so scared that it kept me from enjoying some of my very favorite things. I walked past the wall every day, and I would think about climbing that ladder again. I missed the birds and being high above the city, but I could never do it. I knew accidents can happen. I eventually settled for watching the birds from the ground. It wasn't the same, but it was better than nothing. And then one day, an idea flew by. Making paper planes was harder than I thought. It was easy to get cuts and scratches, but day after day, I kept trying and trying until I got it just right. My plane was perfect. It flew like nothing could stop it. I hadn't felt so happy in a long time. It wasn't the same as being up in the sky with the birds, but it was close enough. Unfortunately, accidents happen. They always do. I almost walked away again, but then I thought about all the time I spent working on my plane and all the other things that I had missed, and I decided I was going to climb that wall. The higher I got, the more nervous I felt. I didn't want to admit it, but I was terrified. I didn't look up. I didn't look down. I just kept climbing, one step at a time, until I was no longer afraid. And maybe now you won't think of me as that egg who was famous for falling. Hopefully now you'll remember me as the egg who got back up and discovered he could fly.
We have two cards this morning, both to folks following surgery. Healing thoughts to Tim Elsey and also to Christina Rodrigue. Both surgeries went well. They're both recovering nicely, so we'll send our well wishes to them. I also want to share with you some information about some upcoming memorial services. We'll have a service for Ada White and Vernon Wright. It's a joint service. We'll have it Friday, April 10th here at 10 o'clock. We'll also have the service for Maxine Bromelsick, Saturday, May 23rd at 10 o'clock. And we'll have the memorial service for Laura Zolke, Saturday, May 30th at 1 o'clock. I now invite you to participate in a ritual that is open to anyone. We invite you to come forward, take a stone, and place it in the chalice. Let the stone represent anything that you might be carrying, whether it's a joy, a sorrow, something in between that you'd like to lay down in the warmth of this community. Please come forward now along the east and west walls. With these words, we light our chalice. With hope to make this a better world, we light this flame. Its light is a symbol of the power of love.
From all that dwell below the skies, let songs of hope and faith arise. Let peace, goodwill on earth be sung, through every land, by every tongue.
It's easy to get tricked, taken for a ride, convinced that joy is a possession, something to be opened just by us, as if it's a holiday special delivery waiting for us to unwrap it and keep it forever. And who can blame us, with pain being so prevalent? Sadness seems to stay. Why can't joy? But maybe it's elusive for a reason. Maybe it's slippery in order to help us understand that it was put here to fly, or better yet, to be flung, to be passed, not possessed, to be spread between you and me, between the ones who received its gift and the ones that have been looking for its treasure for a very long time. Maybe joy is a beautiful and elegant contagion, a power over which we have more control than we think, if only we share it. If only we notice that joy is not ours to keep, but ours to give. Maybe joy opens us as much as we open to it. Maybe that's the way light leaks into our worlds.
Just as I was beginning seminary, my congregation moved into a new building. I was on the board at the time and was involved in renovating the space to make it suitable for Unitarian Universalists. First and foremost, that meant removing the giant wooden cross from the front of the room. If you're new, I need to clarify, UUs don't have a problem with crosses. We're not vampires. There are lots of people who are both UU and Christians, but there's also atheist UUs and agnostic UUs and Buddhists and pagans, just to name a few. So a giant cross at the front of the room would have been lifting up just one perspective, which was a bit more Jesus than my congregation was looking for on a weekly basis. So the theology of it was clear, but in practical terms, it turns out wood is quite heavy. The phrase cross to bear is not just a pretty metaphor. Getting this thing off the wall was a feat of engineering and a near-death experience. And now what? This giant cross wasn't going to fit in the back of my minivan. It would need to be cut in pieces. But you can't use the power saw in the sanctuary because sawdust flies everywhere, and there was an informal rule about no more power saws in the sanctuary, Liz. It was on the verge of becoming a formal rule. So this was the line of thinking that led me to a conversation with my friend Anne, who is a woman of great maturity and perspective. This is a sensitive time for your neighbors, Anne explained. With the loss of the old church that shrank down until they couldn't afford their building, your new neighbors will be grieving. But there's also potential for new connection, for inviting people in. And Liz, the community's introduction to Unitarian Universalism cannot be you taking a power saw to a cross on the front lawn of the church. Find another solution. I'm not sure how the cross was removed in the end. For some reason, they didn't involve me any further, but it got done. But here's the thing. It had hung there for many years, beside the huge vaulted windows through which light streamed down. And it's true what they say. Light really does transform everything it touches, particularly on a timescale of years. And so sure enough, the paint around the cross had grown distinctly lighter, but the paint behind the cross had not so much. And so now, immediately beside the pulpit, was a clear, stenciled outline. This could have been solved by repainting, of course. But in order to do that, we would have had to agree on paint colors. And the decorating committee pointed out that the colors couldn't be chosen until the fabric for the new chairs to replace the pews had been chosen. And the worship committee felt that the pews couldn't be removed until we talked about how we embody our identity in the structure of our worship space, particularly when it comes to how we feel about religious authority, and you get where this is going. For many months, we did not worship beside a giant cross. Instead, we worshiped beside the very conspicuous shadow cast by its absence, a giant metaphorical Jesus was here symbol stenciled above our heads. It was there in more ways than one, actually. It was on the literal wall, of course, but it's also in the conspicuous role that the Protestant tradition we come from plays in everything we do. It's in the tunes of the songs we sing, the fact that we meet on Sunday mornings, often in a building owned explicitly for that purpose. We have expanded our theology, but the way we embody that theology has not changed very much in centuries. To me, the shadow of the cross on the wall on Sunday morning was a physical manifestation of a structure that was frozen in time. It said, we have decided to do things differently, but we're not quite doing that yet because the details are still stuck in committee.
Okay, that might be a little bit too real for us right now in the midst of our strategic planning, but that's okay. So our offering this morning, our shared offering this morning, goes to an organization called LORI. This stands for the Louisiana Organization for Refugees and Immigrants. Their work is perhaps more important now than it ever has been before. Please give generously as you're able, and our offering will now be joyfully given and received. There isn't a right answer. There just isn't. The game show where the bells ring and the points go up and the confetti falls because you got the answer is a lie. The preacher who would assure you of how to attain salvation is making it all up. The doctor who knows just how to fix what ails you will be sure of something else tomorrow. Every choice will wound someone, heal someone, build a wall, and open a conversation. Things will always happen that you can't foresee. But you have to choose. It's all we have, that little rudder that we employ in the midst of all the eddies and rapids, the current that pulls us inexorably toward the sea. The fact that you are swept along by the river is no excuse. Watch where you are going. Lean in toward what you love. And when in doubt, tell the truth.
So at around the time of this Shadow of the Cross business, I was feeling personally stuck in committee myself. I was so in love with the values of Unitarian Universalism, and I was expressing that love by going to seminary, where we talked about this Shadow of the Cross stuff. We wouldn't have used exactly that language, but we talked about how social change was threatening traditional institutions like legacy media and academia and church, and how we might expand our structures to adapt. But we had those conversations in a seminary, mirroring the old ways of doing things with every detail of our structure. The people leading us in those conversations were ministers and professors, trained and experienced with old paradigms, not new ones, which made it really hard to think outside the box. We kept getting stuck in committee. So I sucked at all of this. Even when I'm not critiquing the premise of school, I am a terrible student. Forcing my brain to study has always felt like trying to wrestle an active toddler into a car seat. I had long since received an ADHD diagnosis, which is the medical term for the active toddler car seat situation. I had received medication and behavior suggestions, and of course, all the messages that go with all of that stuff. At the time, I considered myself disordered and the wrong shape for academia. But I loved UUism, and I wanted to serve it. And this was how you did it. So I was determined to squeeze into the shape that was being asked of me. Sometimes. On my better behaved days, I was determined. On my less disciplined days, I would skip the stuff we were supposed to be reading and do what I love to do, which is laugh. And I remember one day procrastinating on homework, watching these comedians on YouTube, and thinking, hey, wait a second. They're talking about the exact same ideas as the people in the books I'm supposed to be reading. Big topics, often tricky ones. Stand-up comedians tackle it all: religion, money, race, ethics. But they do it in a way that's funny and accessible and easier for people in the mainstream to pay attention to. And that was the beginning of a doorway in me. Maybe the fact that I had trouble paying attention to academia wasn't just the flaw that was going to make me a crappy minister, although I firmly believe I would have been a crappy minister. Maybe those same traits, though, would allow me to create conversation and community in different ways, ways that were more accessible to people like me. The farther I moved from a powerless position of a grade school child, the more assertive that line of thinking became. Now I would sit in my school lectures and the usual messages would run through my mind. The problem is, I need to be better at paying attention. But now there was this little voice that argued back. That argued, how come it's always that I have to work harder to pay attention? I have been working as hard as I can for years. How come my professor never has to work any harder at being easier to pay attention to? When it wasn't dry, the stuff I was learning was also, it was not what I expected. I'd always had these stories in my head, like Michael Servetus, the Unitarian martyr, chased and persecuted and ultimately burned at the stake for his brave act of speaking the truth to John Calvin. So it turns out, if you read Servetus' writings in his own words, well, he is smart and articulate. He's also obnoxious. He does not just tell his truth. He stalks John Calvin. He writes him letters arguing about every little point. He writes and distributes books. At one point, Calvin has a warrant out for Servetus' arrest, and Servetus goes to one of Calvin's talks, sits in the front, and stares him down. Servetus was like the worst kind of internet troll, but there in real life all the time. Servetus did not deserve what happened to him. Of course, nobody deserves that. But after reading his actual words dripping with arrogance and condescension, there was like this little part of me that sympathized with John Calvin. I mean, Servetus, I know that guy. I've chaired meetings containing that guy. Sometimes I've been that guy in the meeting. He's the best of us in some ways and the worst of us in others. Or Emerson and Thoreau, that was another one. I had always admired the transcendentalists, how they forged these intentional, beautiful lives full of integrity. Learning a bit more about it, Thoreau could retreat to the woods and suck the marrow out of life because he was living on land Emerson gave him to use for free. Where'd the land come from, Thoreau? This story about how you're making the bold choice to live a simple life in the woods, I think we could say Thoreau didn't invent the idea of living that way. In fact, before Thoreau's people arrived, simple was pretty much the only way anybody ever lived in those woods. There was this whole system supporting Thoreau. He had no kids to take care of. He had his free land, and we're pretty sure Emerson's wife was doing his laundry. Louisa May Alcott, meanwhile, is living a few miles away, making all those same points about simplicity and intentionality in what became her best-selling novel, Little Women, but she wrote in a way that wasn't academic. While her dad sat in the study talking philosophy with Thoreau and Emerson, he did not work for most of her life, Louisa got to work writing. In a world not built for women to have a voice, she found a way to have one. In a world not built for women to earn, she found a way to feed her family with that voice. And she did all that while she was doing her own laundry. So I wasn't the only one thinking along these lines. We lovers of laughter found each other and we bonded, and we used our newfound knowledge to play very historically specific pranks on each other. One time, some of our friends who ran a UU housing cooperative in Boston posted online that they were accepting applications for new roommates. A few of us applied as various famous Unitarians and Universalists. We applied as Emerson, listing Thoreau under pets. We applied as Michael Servetus, and under food allergies, we listed barbecue. I'm not endorsing it, I'm just telling you what happened. We applied as the people we thought were missing from our mainstream history, too. Reverend Olympia Brown, the first woman in the US to be ordained, or Dorothy Dix, whose lobbying transformed conditions for institutionalized people in the US, Canada, and several other countries. These women's names are not our best-known heroes, but when you line their lives up against Thoreau in the woods or Servetus with his letters, you can't deny their stories deserve at least as much acknowledgement. So the housing co-op wrote back and invited us for an interview, which was going to be tricky as we were dead. The housing co-op also cautioned us in the letter that some housemates may not have experience in living with the dead and may require education on matters of corporeal privilege. All this was followed by a week of messaging and coordinating and giggling and pranking that left me feeling warm and connected. Connected with my peers and with my UU heritage, poking fun at things that deserved it, lifting up stories that aren't always told. connected with my values as we coordinated to make sure the prank stayed joyful for everybody involved. Above all, the prank left me feeling a part of Unitarian Universalism. We understood the shared jokes because they come out of shared culture. I mean, corporeal privilege? How you is that joke? This was a space that had room for me, where I didn't have to change shape to fit into a prescribed shadow. And I didn't want to end. So on a whim, I created a Facebook group, and I named it the UU Hysterical Society, which is a play on the UU Historical Society, who have changed their name like twice since then, so nobody ever gets my joke. People just point out that the word hysterical has a troublesome history, because it does. Throughout history, the symptoms of hysteria have been varied. Sometimes it was a woman who was struggling with what we might call a mental illness or a disability today. Sometimes it was a physical condition like epilepsy, or a life choice like deciding not to get married. Hysteria was a catch-all word for any woman who was inconvenient and must be treated. A hysterical woman is a woman who is the wrong shape. And I, who was struggling so hard to fit into the shadow of the cross, I loved my UU Hysterical Society. It was an expression of my values. It was a space that fit me. It was a break from the ministerial formation process at a time when that process was starting to break me. I invite you to pause for a moment now and rise in body or spirit, and we will sing together, "My Life is Made Worthwhile."
Life is made worthwhile by fighting bravely on for those ideals I hold most great and holy. Though evil winds may blow, they will not rock the calm in my soul, which remains both quiet and lowly. I might be disappointed, I might fall in the fight, but I am sure that my life was worth living. The life which is to come has been my holy shrine. I trust that I have lived a life worth giving. For heaven waits for those whose spirits have won through, but I am sure that my life was worth living. And they will find the sun, whose minds have let them rise, and stand against the darkness and the mayhem. I might be disappointed, I might fall in the fight, but I am sure that my life was worth living. The life which is to come has been my holy shrine. I trust that I have lived a life worth giving.
And so after creating it, it continued for years, and I didn't really understand what was happening, but I just trusted that it was worth doing. I didn't think of it, the Hysterical Society, as anything other than Liz's personal refuge from all that was going on in the world. By the time I clued in that something else was happening, we had about 20,000 members in the Facebook group. Someone posted that she nearly drove her car off the road after spotting a UU church. She said she thought we were a joke religion made up for the purposes of the UU Hysterical Society, and that seeing a real UU church was like spotting a unicorn. She almost drove her car off the road, she said, yelling, "They're real! They're real!" And I thought, wow, we could be telling 20,000 people about what Unitarian Universalism is. And then I thought, oh crap, I am not the right person to represent UUism on that kind of scale. I didn't finish the assigned reading. Fortunately, I didn't have to be the right person for the job. I met a religious educator named Kathy Smith who had finished the assigned reading. So I don't usually tell this story, but she had been a part of the group observing that maybe I could use a little help, and I had been thinking how maybe I could use a little help and that Kathy was the right person to offer it, and we were at the same conference, and so she came and sat in the booth and visited with me, and over the course of several days, this conversation unfolded in which she was trying to convince me to accept help, and I was trying to convince her to offer help. So that worked out quite nicely. So Kathy Smith joined the team at about that time and was able to fill in some of the gaps. And together we stewarded the group as it continued to grow. And I toyed with the idea that maybe we should become something more, maybe a legal entity that could apply for grants to compensate Kathy a bit for all this extra work she was putting in. But even thinking along those lines felt presumptive, like who did I think we were? This is not a rhetorical question. I had no idea who we were or what we were doing. And then in November of 2019, something happened that changed my perspective forever. My friend Reverend Mbutsa Ndajijimana approached me for help raising money to settle a group of refugees. And so in November of 2019, the Hysterical Society held its first charity fundraiser, which was holiday themed. We sold funny PDFs, like labels for wine that said, "Hey, this was water a minute ago." We sold tags that said, "It's the thought that counts, and I way overthought this gift." We sold flasks that said, "For when thoughts and prayers are not enough." And "This is my spiritual practice," which is a pun in two ways. And we raised more than $16,000. And so on one of my trips to the post office, arms full of flasks, the post office guy finally said, looking at the return address, "Okay, I'll bite. What is a hysterical society?" And I didn't respond how I usually do when asked what I do for a living. Normally I mumble, "I run a Facebook group that makes fun of my religion." This is not an accurate answer, but it does usually end the conversation. Instead, I lifted my head up and I grinned, and I answered with confidence and said we are a group that is about joy and community and refugees. We had started gathering around laughter, which is a good in and of itself. It's like a soup kitchen for the soul. But we were slowly turning into more than that. We were still about laughter and community, but also about bringing dignity to people who deserve a chance to build a life. The Canadian not-for-profit Mirth and Dignity, Inherent Mirth and Dignity, was incorporated the following month. To this day, 100% of the profit from our merchandise, available today by donation at the back, goes to the charity that Mbutsa founded. But most of what we do is support for forms of UUism that are not supported by traditional institutions. We started with the UU Hysterical Society, which under Kathy's leadership has reached more than 300,000 members. Yeah. I don't know if anyone's counting, but that's more than almost twice the membership of the UUA, but anyways, not to brag on your behalf. Oh, look how red you are. The UUA Facebook group, right? Then we added a board game ministry, and we partnered with a comedy podcast, and more recently, online soulful singing. I could go on, but this is not an infomercial. You don't need this level of detail. For now, what I want to draw you to is the overarching arc of the story, that feeling of not quite fitting into the shape you're being asked to fit into, which is, I find, a feeling that a lot of UUs can empathize with. Many of us became UU because we didn't fit into the communities we were born into. We have figured out how to be diverse theologically, and I believe we are also right now in the process of creating a structural diversity, a bunch of different ways to be UU or interface with UUism. We have together inherited a shadow of a cross, a set of institution and practices that define real religion that don't fully work for modern communities. I've heard from people who feel like they're tired, like they're trying to do too much, like they feel focused on the wrong things. In our churches and in larger society, we are working ourselves to exhaustion, and it is not always doing the trick. What if we're not cracking because we're breaking, but because we're turning into something different? What if we lean into changing shape into a version of Unitarian Universalism that contains not only churches, but also other types of communities supporting each other in a symbiotic relationship? So I don't know where that would lead, any more than I knew where that prank in 2015 was going to lead. But I do know that the first step is to give ourselves permission to be who we are, not who we think we're supposed to be or who we have always been. What would we do differently if we saw ourselves as hatching? As the Leonard Cohen lyric tells us so beautifully, ring the bells that still can ring, forget your perfect offering. There are cracks in everything, that's how the light gets in. Which I think is true, but it's also not the whole picture. The cracks are how the light gets out, sure, but the cracks are how the light gets in, sure. Sometimes, though, the cracks are how the light gets out. The cracks are where the hatching starts. I invite you to rise in body or spirit, and we will sing.
From the light of days remembered burns a beacon bright and clear, guiding hands and hearts and spirits in the faith set free from fear. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flames that burn within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the stories of our living rings a song both brave and free, calling pilgrims still to witness to the life of liberty. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the dreams of youthful vision comes a new prophetic voice, which demands a deeper justice built by our courageous choice. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin.
Let us go forth into the world open to its gifts, to the cracks, to the hatching, and to all the glorious shapes we might take, to the places where we let the light in and where we let the light out. Go in peace.